This is an interview about the newly launched CINEFLARES.com, the world's largest interactive lens flare collection by Markus Förderer, ASC. Welcome everybody to this CineD interview with Markus Förderer, ASC, the founder and creator of CINEFLARES, the world's most comprehensive lens flare library. And yeah, it's my pleasure to say hello.
Hi, Nino. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on board. Actually, last time we spoke was probably a year ago at Camrimage, where you pitched to me this idea and asked me what I think about a library for anamorphic lens flares. And not only technically, but also every single one of those lenses was tested by you. But I don't want to give it away, so today, the beta of this launched, and maybe you can just explain what it is and also talk a little bit about yourself for people who don't know who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Markus Förderer. I'm a cinematographer. I'm initially from Germany, and a couple of years ago, I moved to the States after shooting a couple of films. Maybe you've seen some of my work, like Red Notice on Netflix is probably one of the biggest films. I work with Roland Emmerich on a couple of movies. And this whole lens flare obsession of mine started over 10 years ago. I was just graduating from film school, and I was looking I needed to do a technical degree project. And I had just wrapped my first feature film, which was a post-apocalyptic film. It's called Hell, and the story was about the sun is so bright that you can't go outside anymore. So I had just experimented a lot with lenses, lens flares, and coatings to find the right look for that film. So that's when it started. I started shooting a lot of lens flare tests, and usually every time I see other assistants or colleagues maybe testing lenses, you always see an assistant in a test bay with a flashlight moving around. And I realized this is very inconsistent and hard to compare because every angle of degree changes so much. So I realized I have to shoot it with motion control. And so over the years, I built this library and perfected that process. And I kept showing it to directors I work with or visual effects supervisors and other cinematographers through the ASC. And everybody kept pushing me saying, you have to publish this in a way. And I'm not a programmer, so it took me a while to find the right team to help me make a platform that actually works stable online. And so now we finally have a version to share with the world, and I'm really curious to see the feedback of people using it and what features to implement. And so the base idea is you can how I use it basically is this. I think there's so many lenses out there and people might get overwhelmed in choosing and how do you test. And I feel like a lens flare is for me, it's like a fingerprint or the DNA of a lens. If you shine purely light into a lens, the lens will reveal its character. It will show you, is it fairly clean and neutral, or will it have a lot of wheeling glare, soft contrast, all these things. So the site allows you to compare different cinema lenses side by side. It's all motion control, time code synced, so you can see them side by side, find out what you like. You can compare the same lens to itself, wide open, stop down, see what you like, what you don't like, and then eventually share this with your collaborators. And maybe you find something you want to test specifically for your project, and you go to your rental house or a lens you want to buy potentially and do your own testing specific to that project. Maybe you go on a location, day exterior or whatever. But this offers you, the CINEFLARES platform offers you a controlled way to discover and analyze lenses.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. I think so far everybody had to go and test lenses, right, for a shoot. If you want to shoot anamorphic, you would go out to a rental house and you would go through all the anamorphic lenses and try and find what suits the mood you need. And of course, a lot of that comes down to experience with lenses, but nobody can know all the lenses. I mean, that's simply impossible. And I think not even manufacturers really document what their flares look like, right? I mean, that's simply something that's very much baked into there's the cook look, and then there's a look for something else, but it's still different. It also differs from lens to lens. Who's your target group? I mean, is it the cinematographers? Is it the assistants? Is it the rental houses, or all of them?
I think all of them, or whoever wants to play with it. For now, it's basically built the way I think I would use it as a cinematographer. But I showed it to visual effects supervisors. They're very interested, of course, they're working on a show, maybe have a specific lens they want to replicate, and to see it really in motion, because flares are so dynamic. Like if you have a light source in the center or the edge of frame where it's different T-stops, it changes dramatically. So to see what a real lens does, I think I think I built it in a way for cinematographers and directors, filmmakers, but I think it's interesting for a lot of people who are working with cameras, or even like I said, visual effects artists or people designing games. Like you see flares everywhere to, add realism or. And that's what this beta launch now is good for. Like we're working on a lot of features under the hood to release the full version. But I'm really curious to hear feedback. What do people want? Like right now it's very minimalist on purpose, so we try to keep it as clean as possible so you can focus on the flares. There's not that many options, but we're definitely interested to hear what users say, what they want, and then we'll hopefully implement that.
This is so cool. I mean, how much time did you invest in this now? If you think about all the lenses, I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of them.
It's many years. So like I said, it started over 10 years ago, but then at a certain point, like that's when this concept started, and I shot some lenses, motion control, and then I realized after a bit of a break, I have to start from scratch so I can guarantee I have the same motion control system, the same lighting, the same camera, everything is exactly the same, and shoot it in large format, because back then, 10 years, there was not large format. So I started from scratch and added many more lenses. So it's quite a time-consuming process to set it up and make sure it runs smoothly. And then you have to shoot every lens at different T-stops, different focal lengths. I try to not overwhelm people with like a full lens set. I think it's mainly focused on a wide normal lens and a longer lens. So that's usually in spherical 18, 35, and 50. And for anamorphic, it's like 35, 50, and 75, which would be the equivalent focal length. Some sets where they have very unique individual lenses, and we added more, but some are like fairly basic. And then each of those have different T-stops from wide open, always from wide open to T4, sometimes more than T4 if there's something unique happening. And actually, I have to say, even like I spent so much time with lenses, working as a cinematographer, and I thought, I know most of those lenses. I've tested them many times, like with actors and, in scenarios. But through this kind of lab test, what it is in a way, I discovered things and phenomena I've never seen, and I really appreciate now. And I know when I talk with a director about an upcoming project, and there might be some flashback sequence, and you discuss how can you separate that from the rest of the story, and I might know immediately this kind of lens from that era has a really interesting character. That's also very important. That's not distracting from the narrative, right? You don't want just eye candy, funky lens flares. I think that's years ago when there was a big trend with maybe Star Trek, right? And JJ really diving deep into lens flares. There was some people maybe complaining it's too much. And I think it's important to find a balance that you add some character, but not distract from what's really important. And that's, again, the flare side helps you to find something that's not overly crazy, but adds to whatever you're looking for.
I like that you focused on this one aspect of the lenses. I mean, because you mentioned lab tests, viewers might know that we do our own lab tests of sensors, camera sensors, dynamic range, latitude, and rolling shutter. And we focus on these three things because those are the ones we are certain that we can repeat with every camera in the same scientific way. And it's similar to what you do with the lens flares because it's repeatable. I mean, there's lots of other aspects of lenses, of course, but I mean, you cannot test everything. And I think it's good that there is some focus, because that is, of course, one of the main characteristics of anamorphic lenses specifically.
Yeah, and it's good you mentioned this. Like, sometimes people come up to me like, could you add whatever distortion or chromatic aberration and other aspects? And I truly believe this, like the flare is like the core. It shows you a lot of those aspects, but it's impossible to, to truly test for every scenario. And that's why I like this reduced minimalistic flare test. Shows you, I think it just shows you the character, and then you should test, in my opinion, for whatever the scenario requires of your project. Or maybe it just tells you already enough, or you might probably be familiar with some of the lenses anyways. In a way, also, I think to be inspired, I think that's so important. Like, this is a tool that's very minimalistic. There's no face, no landscape, no wide shot. But because it's minimalistic, I feel like also it's very universal to adapt to your project and find something that's, sometimes if you want to share something with the director and it has the wrong location, and it might be hard for them to understand what you're talking about. But by showing purely the flare or the lens character in a way, that's helpful. And like, to add to this, like on most projects, I'm a big fan of shooting anamorphic, and so many times there's discussions with either directors who've never worked with anamorphic or producers. What's the difference, right? And you show them this flare side by side with a spherical lens, they will immediately understand. And it's, most people think of anamorphic, it's a typical blue streak, but you will see this, of course, there's so many different characteristics to discover.
I guess it's a little bit too early for this, but there might be plans to also combine the recorded lens flares with footage or stills in the background, I guess.
Yeah, that's something we're thinking about too. Many ideas. We're going to make sure this runs stable, and maybe also there's an app version. I think it's very useful to have on an iPad and add some other features, but that's one way, because it's motion controlled, to show you a real life scenario, but it has to be always the same. So there's a way to combine that. That's something we're looking into. Or just have a couple of references of how this lens looks in from some tests, whatever, in a wide shot or a night exterior. 2-3 references or something. But this will take a while to do.
Well, I guess it's also not that easy, because you would have to adjust for the focal length, right? I mean, you can't show a 70 mil and put that on the lens flare of a 24 or something. It will look strange.
Yeah, and it was important to find something that can be replicated in the future. Like you said, I love the tests you're doing with the sensor dynamic range test, which is so useful, right? Like, I think everybody in the industry is like looking at that when you release something new, and it's so controlled, and it's focusing on one aspect, but one key aspect, right? And you found a way that you can replicate this in the future. That's so important, because if you do it, let's say you do a lens test now, like I think almost every other week there's a new lens coming out, right? There's so many new manufacturers and players, like from China, Korea, and even the traditional lens manufacturers who were maybe 10, 15 years ago, they had like 1 or 2, 3 lens sets. Now they're coming out every other year, right, with something new or a new flavor. So that's why it's important to have a future-proof testing scenario.
And actually, you mentioned before that you only testing a couple focal lengths per lens set. I mean, I can tell you now from the experience with our lab test, everybody will come knocking down your door asking for all the ones that are missing all the time. But yeah, there's only 24 hours in a day.
We can add more. That's a good thing, because it's a controlled system. And for some, we have more in, like, we have our development library, which is bigger than what's out there. It always takes a bit to organize everything and sync it and put it on a platform. Yeah, if you want, I'll give you a quick look how the system looks like.
I just wanted to say, let's dive right in.
Yes, okay. So it's a very simple interface. There's the same selection of lenses on the left side and the right side, and there's like a dual player. You can select whatever. That's always very interesting. It's in the spherical world, Bausch and Lomb Super Baltars, They have like very unique, cool flares. And for example, compare them to our CineProminars. They have something called a gold coating. They create very warm flares, but the image itself is not warm. And here you can select your focal length, like 35, for example, your T-stop, T4. And there's more features coming, so we're working on a way that you can save your favorites and then share those with whatever, your director, your effect supervisor, your collaborators.
Very nice. And at the same time, people can go to the lens coverage tool that we have on the site and actually see what sensor size they can use it with.
Definitely. That's so cool about all these specialized tools, right? You can pick what you need to know, and that's so interesting. You see a bit with the flare, you see the coverage, so we shot it large format, and purposefully we shot even Super 35 large format open gate, so you see the maximum usable image circle in a way too, like not very mathematical, but you see when the light enters the frame, and maybe for some scenarios you might want to use it. It looks almost like in space in a way, right? Some people look at this and think like, oh, this looks like, 2001 A Space Odyssey. It's the sun. You have no sense for scale. In some cases, I use some of those lenses as references too for visual effects shots and show to a visual effects supervisor. And we might say, let's use the full maximum aperture, like not just use the Super 35, even if it wasn't done for large format, because some really interesting flaring is happening at the edge of the illumination.
Very cool. So what's your plan with it? We are in beta version. So where is this going? Will this be a subscription for people to have access to this continuously?
So I'm a full-time cinematographer. So I have now a small team. They help me develop this. My plan is to always keep a basic version accessible for everyone, but we're putting quite a lot of time and effort into it. So we're working on a pro version that has more and more growing features and has the full library. And like I mentioned, we will then once a month add new lenses, like either new lenses or add some rare vintage lenses which we haven't captured yet. And this would be some sort of a subscription. And that's what also this beta phase is for. We're just looking for feedback if people are even interested in this, because it's quite aware it's quite a niche subject, right? Like I'm a big lens nerd, and I know there's 5-6 other lens nerds out there, but is it relevant for enough people to justify a small subscription, or do we have to find some other way to keep it going? But I would like for this to keep on going and growing, and for this we need some sort of support, basically.
I think definitely, yes, it's a niche, but I know from our experience with the lab test, which is the same, like nerdy niche, I would say, that there will be interest. The question is, of course, how many people do you need to keep this afloat? But I think for cinematographers and assistants and also post-production especially, this will be invaluable. So I think there's a big need for this. And it might actually make, when I think about it, the pre-selection of lenses easier, because in the very early stages, it just gives you a wider view of what's available on the market before you make your decision. Because I think everybody is kind of like, even if you have access to all the tools, you never have the time to test all the tools. So you can actually go through and just think about what look are you after, and then narrow down your selection until where you get to a point where you actually test those lenses at a rental house or wherever. And I think otherwise you might have looked at 5 different lens sets, and now you can look at 20 different ones that go in your direction. But that's just my feeling. But I'm sure, like when people see this video, you'll be at Camera Image, and I'm sure you'll have dozens of discussions about this, and I'm sure that people will really, really, like to use this.
I hope so too. And I want to emphasize again, this is not just about lens flares. It's called CineFlares, but it's really to find the character of a lens. Like sometimes we shoot, like on a bigger movie, we have like our A camera and big sets of lenses, and then we suddenly need to fly a drone, or we need some smaller crash cameras, and we can rig our big anamorphics. So this is super interesting to find a lens that has a similar character in contrast, and the kind of Wheeling glare it creates, not necessarily the pure flare pattern, but you see already like a clean, modern spherical lens, you would have a hard time in your color timing to match this to like a vintage lens. And this is really what I'm so excited about, to just find which lens has character you like. Of course, also the flare pattern itself, but just to find lenses that match other lenses you use and you cannot use in a certain use case. And I'm super curious to hear back what users out there think of it and what direction this should take. I don't know if people are interested to really use the actual plates for visual effects comps, but for now I see it as a library and a tool to discover and learn. I learned so much about lenses, and I keep learning every day. You literally see, when you stop down, you see the iris pattern, when people talk about the Cook look or what is the magic of a Panavision lens, and there's so many unique characteristics you suddenly see in the flare, you get a sense for the bokeh, for the chromatic aberration. Some flares are very neutral, some have almost like a rainbow, it's called like a rainbow flare. Some lenses show narcissism, like they reflect back part of their inner lens housing in a way, or you see the reflection of the iris blade. So it's a very fascinating field.
Wow, narcissistic lenses. Now they need a psychiatrist as well. Interesting. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I'm sure you will. You have to be ready for much feedback, like a lot of requests from different directions, and this can take so many directions, right? I think it's endless, as we talked about before. So quite interesting. I'm very curious into which direction you will take this, but I'm sure it will be extremely useful.
I hope so too.
All right. Thank you, Markus, and good luck with the project. Keep us posted. Maybe let's do another call like this further down in time when the project has evolved even more. And great success. I wish you great success with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Nino. And thanks for this conversation.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Stay tuned to CineD for a lot more video interviews and reviews like this one. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks.